I start with what inspired me to get here. It was really by, okay, well, I think I could do this and financially made sense. I got rejected. So I wrote back and gave him like a 10-point reason why you should actually still consider me. So I think the main thing was being intimately involved in problems. There were a lot of problems there to solve. And because you're in those problems and having to think of ways to solve them and doing so alongside a lot of smart people, you naturally grow. If you're not there solving problems, then I encourage you to go and solve problems right now. That's where you start to learn. And then you know in your toolbox, if a problem was to be presented to you, you know 99 ways that you shouldn't do things. And how those learnings becomes the 3 solutions that you can try.
Welcome back to a very special episode on Tech Talk 360. And today we have one of a very special guest on the show. And it's none other than Kenny Her. So, hi Kenny, how are you doing today?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me on the show.
Amazing, amazing. So, to talk about Kenny, Kenny is currently a tech partnership lead looking after Singapore and Indonesian markets at Google based in Singapore. So, in his role, he helps grow tech partners, businesses in the region, and then customers' ability to leverage data and analytics with GFO, with their new platform, to drive positive marketing outcomes. So, Kenny, who is Kenny? That's my first question. Who is Kenny and how is he here today?
Who am I? Well, that's a I'm not sure how I can answer that in a short sentence, but I'm gonna try. Well, I think first and foremost, I am accidental geek. Uh, so I stumbled upon the world of marketing analytics circa about 7 years ago. But prior to that, I've been in multiple roles in growth or sales, marketing, and also in creative and experiential or events. Um, in all the roles that I've occupied, it always had a sales element to that. So I think that's the common denominator. So I guess I could call myself a seasoned growth leader. But I think more so beyond that, I'm just a person who just wants to learn and to expand more horizons, so that I can have meaningful conversations wherever I go. Um, but if you ask me in my personal capacity, right now I'm a father of a adorable 3-year-old son. Um, I used to be a death metal musician. I used to play drums for about 9 years with a death metal band based in Singapore, where we toured the region in Southeast Asia, released an album. Um, and I just love music. I love being by the beach. So beyond work, I'm just another regular person.
Amazing. The drums part sounds exciting.
It was very fun. I truly do miss it.
Amazing. So Kenny, throughout your incredible journey in the marketing world and digital marketing world, especially working with some of the biggest names like Google and TikTok, could you give us like an overview on your career path and what you led to who you are today?
Yeah, I think I touched a little bit about that in my introduction, but my career, I must say, has been quite diverse. Over the span of, I think, more than 15 years now, I've had multiple roles in different companies. I was I guess, a marketer where I helped to um, market and run events at now defunct Cafe Del Mar. It's a huge beachfront sort of club slash restaurant slash lifestyle venue based in Singapore previously. Um, but then life took very and many interesting turns. I went into events management. I was a credit risk analyst for 2 years at Credit Suisse. I've done cloud communication sales, and then I finally, I think, found my niche, I guess, and an industry that I wanted to be a part of for long term. Um, when I got an interesting a call from a recruiter asking me whether, hey, do you want to take up a job where you help this startup, or rather this established tech partner based out of Australia, start something in Southeast Asia, grow the business, look after a small portfolio of customers, and see how we can grow them. Um, from then on, it took off, and here I am at Google. Um, there were many incredible people that I met and things I've learned that got me here. So I can't take all the credit. But it's really the willingness to really put yourself in uncomfortable situations where you may not know anything, right? And then go with the mindset of thriving and picking up relevant skills so that you can kind of hone yourself into a very valuable, I guess, product or personal brand, right? That will then take you anywhere you want to go. Ensure you have malleable skills and so on.
Amazing. So I will just stick on to what where you are right now in Google. As someone who has navigated various leadership roles, what are like the key challenges and opportunities you have encountered in managing like tech partnerships at Google?
Uh, yeah, that's a great question. I guess the number one thing that comes to mind is when you are when you're in a partnerships role and I would dare say in a very, very senior role where it's multi-market, there are various senior management leadership position people that you have to kind of work with. You realize more and more that you don't have any sort of real control, right? I think everyone imagines like, oh, if you're the top of an organization, you just say the word and everyone just does it, right? But that's not really the reality from what I see, right? There's of course some influence or in that decision, but I would say influence uh, is what you really need, right? So that's the opportunity there, right? Because I don't have any control over my partners, right? I can only influence them. And these are very senior people in their own organizations, right? They establish themselves in leadership roles, and so on, right? So I guess that's the opportunity there, right? You really need to learn that skill and ability to influence these people. Um, but I guess my experience has really helped me there. Um, Given my track record, I have established myself as a thought growth leader in this space. So that credibility has helped me to do just that. When I speak to my partners, I come from a place where I care and I have been through what they have been through or are going through. So then I try to use that to influence them positively, right? And this is very critical because we are trying to achieve multiple objectives, not just for Google, but for customers. But while keeping in mind that you need to grow their business. So there's a lot of things you need to learn. There's a lot of ways that you need to try to influence people. Um, but it really starts with a place of caring. So I can't really lay out all the opportunities you have that you can get from there because it's so multifaceted. But I guess if you learn that one, if you have to say one thing, if you learn that one skill of influence, that's where you're really learning the skills of being a leader because that's exactly what leaders have to do. You don't just tell people and expect them to like it and do what you do. If you influence them positively, they will then you're now learning the skills of how to become an executive. I guess that's the opportunity for me in my role.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But like I mentioned, Kenny, when we met last time, this is my podcast is like more focused to the youth and people who are getting into the career and driving towards the career. So with over like with the experience that you have for the past couple of years, like in providing solutions, what actually inspired you to pursue a career in this field, and how has your journey evolved throughout these years? And what especially you have to tell like the youth who's coming into this era with the technology being driving crazy, what do you have to say about that on your journey?
Oh, woof. There's a lot there. So I guess maybe I'll start with what inspired me to get here. It was really by chance. I think Lady Luck was smiling on me a little bit. So this was quite like halfway through into my career to date. I was in creative at that time, um, but I had a lot of there was a lot of need for me to kind of grow my income. There was a lot of need for me to grow my career very, very quickly because I was looking after my family members and financially and so on. And then I got a call from a recruiter, as I mentioned, who offered me this role. to help an Australian company start something up in Southeast Asia, and I jumped at it because financially it made a lot of sense for me. So I can't say that it was a very inspiring story where this was a perfect fit and I could I was doing this already and I could grow. There was none of that. It was more like, okay, well, I think I could do this and financially it made sense. I got rejected at first, but I pushed on, right? I didn't stop at just a rejection. I think that it was a salesman in me. I think if there was any lesson to any of you inspiring or used to kind of grow your careers, never take no for an answer. I think that's the first lesson there. So I wrote back and gave him like a 10-point reason why you should actually still consider me, even though you say I may not have all the relevant skills or knowledge of this industry for Google Analytics. Um, Lady Luck once again smiled on me and he said, "Okay, they're willing to give you a shot." So, but I didn't take that opportunity lying down. Um, what I did was I built a deck to sell myself, and this goes back to developing yourself like a product and personal branding, right? Like you are branding and marketing a product yourself in the marketplace with USPs and so on. So I built a deck and I presented myself as such. This is me. This is what I've done. These are the brands I've worked with. This is the value and outcomes I've delivered. This is why you should pick me. And that worked, I guess, because I don't think in an interview anyone would present a deck about themselves at that time anyway that I knew of. But I thought that was something that I needed to do, right? Because people may not be overly convinced that verbally you are the right candidate. So I got to the next round, and then they asked me to, uh, you know, interview and present this product like I knew it. They were expecting maybe 10 slides or something. And I was doing back-to-back events. I didn't have time. I literally just got home at 8 p.m., had my dinner. 9 p.m., I started working on a deck. And I researched the hell out of Google Analytics. I watched YouTube videos after YouTube videos, and I presented. I built a beautiful deck. I think it's beautiful anyway. Like I think it was 25 or 30 slides or something like that, and I presented it like I knew it. And I think the YouTube videos helped because the explanation was very, very clear. Um, and I think they bought it. I don't think they were expecting anyone who probably was not in this field to explain it like they were. So that's really lesson number three. It's even if you don't feel like you know the industry or product well, and if you ever get like imposter syndrome, right? Just really think of any opportunities where you get to present or share knowledge about something you're not an expert in or 100% unclear of, to really just take up the challenge of in that short period of time, just learn as much as you can, and then you humanize it, right? Oftentimes people think that they have to be an expert where they need to memorize all the technical stuff. But that's actually not what sells or what people resonate with, right? The number one thing I think I did well was I created a very good narrative and story. So when I was selling it, what I was doing was storytelling it and using anecdotes. So if you were to kind of come into something new, remember that it's not that you have to be an expert in all the technical nitty-gritties. It's that you have to be able to put together a very good story and then use these stories to kind of connect with people, not just on an on an intellectual level, but also an emotional level, right? It's only then you really can kind of take on new roles, pivot, uh, level yourself up into a role that is much more senior than you thought you could ever occupy, right? And that really helps with any person's career journey. So for my career journey, I started out in this industry like that, but I utilize also all the skills I've learned in my previous jobs, be it creative, be it growth and sales, operations and production. All these things comes together because I use all that when I was weaving my story. I used all that knowledge to make sure that I was able to put together a great deck to weave that narrative together and sell that, right? So also use that. That's I think the next lesson. Don't look at your career as a job title that you need to chase or the next company you need to chase. Look at your career as what are the skills that I need to really acquire, right? Because if you're going to build yourself like a product, you need features, you need a USP. So the skills that you're picking up, you may not necessarily occupy a fancy job title that you are very, very proud of, but if you identify a skill that you need to acquire in order for you to become that product that would then elevate your career, I think that's something that people need to start thinking about.
Amazing. So, if I just ask you from there, if you take that same thing, all these years, like you mentioned, there are some turning points in life. So, if I just ask you, what were like the key moments or experience that you have had and that shaped your approach throughout the career in like a problem solving and leadership approach, which is something that's really important, like you mentioned, the personal brand to someone. So throughout, what would you actually tell about the moments and experiences that you have had?
Every job that I had was key in molding uh, myself into the person I am today, I would say, because they shaped me in different ways. And more importantly, it was all the people that I interacted with along the way as well, both from my peers to my leaders. I think I have very good fortune of working with a lot of compassionate leaders who are willing to teach me, to show me their perspectives on things, um, and to really groom me into to someone that's more solid, I would say. But if I was to kind of keep it more relevant, I think in the past couple of years, I really owe a lot of my uh, accelerated growth to MediaMonks, my time at MediaMonks, to be honest. Um, Firstly, I was given immense opportunities to take a handle on things, try new things, to grow myself into a leader, take initiative there. Um, but really, like it was also working with highly intelligent and motivated individuals because I learned so much from them. Um, the pandemic hit, so I very had to very quickly, you know, um, pivot, take the initiative to do a lot of things that could to bring our business to out of where it was to something that was a bit more positive, I would say. Um, the support of management and the ability to go and manage multiple markets really, really helped me because that's all the perspectives from your customers, from different people, your peers, your partners, your principals. Um, and then, of course, I think the main thing was being intimately involved in problems. There were a lot of problems that I had to solve. Um, and because you're in those problems and having to think of ways to solve them and doing so alongside a lot of smart people, you naturally grow. And these are all the stories and the battle scars you take with you upwards, forwards into your career and into your personal life, right? If you're not involved in problems or you're not solving any problems at all, then you're not growing. And you're definitely not molding yourself to become a leader because if the higher you go, the harder the problems you would have to solve, right? So if you're not there solving problems, then I encourage you to go and solve problems right now.
That is an amazing answer. So the next question is something that I really wanted to ask you, and something that's really interesting currently is about the cloud technologies, cloud communications, and data and analytics. So given the experience so far in those aspects, if I just ask you what emerging trends or technologies that you are most excited about, you are inside Google and you know what's happening and what's the future. So what changes and what favorites are yours, if I just ask you, and how interesting is going to be with these technologies for the future of the world? You are the best person to ask.
Um, Look, I think I cannot speak on behalf of Google. I don't think it's appropriate for me to do so. Um, but in my personal capacity, let me share with you what I I'm most excited about, right? I'm not going to come from what these business trends are, what these technological trends are, and so on, right? Because that's not actually what matters. Technologies and, technologies are really meant to help make people's lives better. I personally believe so, right? So I like to always view things from that angle, right? So first and foremost, I see a bigger trend of technologies really becoming more human, more accessible, right? And expanding beyond subject matter experts or power users. And I'm talking about more maybe since you're talking about cloud communications, data analytics, right? I think that's going to be the thing because for a very long time now, the technologies that have been produced have been based around we need to have all these crazy features and we needs to be so hard and look so impressive, right? But as it evolved over time, I think it's getting to a point where the exclusive few can use it, but then if you look at the broader population of users, I think it's getting hard, right? So because of how AI or are progressing, I'm now seeing that the trend is more towards, okay, now we've done this very complex tooling, but now we're also seeing adoption rates being a bit more challenged. It's time to actually look at the users and think about, okay, what do they need? And what we need is talk to me in my language. How can I be, using this to the best of my abilities? I may not be an analyst, I may not be a super technical guy, but I should be able to use this, right? So that's number one. I think number two is um, something I mentioned earlier on AI. AI is an overtly used buzzword, uh, and it's beaten to death with a stick, right? But at the same time, we cannot deny the immense opportunities that it presents. I think the number one thing for me is that its ability to take away a lot of monotonous work. Uh, and this kind of work, right? The work that you go in, day out, it's repetitive. It's like you ask yourself, why am I doing this? But that being said, uh, there will definitely be still some resistance, right? Because to kind of move towards how AI can take this away, because many livelihoods actually still depend on doing these sorts of work, right? But I sincerely believe if like we can manage the needs of people um, and balance that with the outcomes of elevating these people so that the work that they do becomes more high value, it's less time consuming, it's automated, it brings joy to them every time they go to the office instead of like, here we go again, right? I think that's where the opportunity would, where the opportunity is really, right? Um, and I think I do see the potentials for the quality of life increasing if we do this very well, right? Where our time spent at work would eventually become lesser because of automations. Because high value work shouldn't take 8 hours a day to do actually. If you really were to focus on high value work, it's a half day thing, right? Um, so then that allows us to focus on what matters, which is the human connection. Um, However, these will of course be very long tail changes because a lot of the existing corporate structures are entrenched in the ways that we work today. And the second aspect to that is how we view compensation and the value of work or the workforce when these shifts happen, right? There will be trade-offs, and if we manage these things very well, I believe that when done well, this will all benefit us because I think if you just look on social media or the news today, like we're all burnt out. Um, that's the reality of it today. But if we do this right and let automation or artificial intelligence, the right kind, not the ones that will bring doom and gloom to us, um, if that comes into play, then I think it allows us to actually live lives as human beings properly, right? But I think that aside, um, if you really to kind of go back into the technology bit, um, I think there will be a lot of disruption um, in the way we interact with the world, and that will become very normal place very very soon, faster than what we expect it to be. I mean, if you look at how like what 2 years ago OpenAI was launched, right? ChatGPT was launched, and then fast forward only 2 years, you can see the immense change that has happened today, and we are also seeing things like, AI vision. We're seeing like AR, like augmented reality, becoming also a part of life. There's the meta glasses, there's Apple Vision, there's all these things, right? So there's a lot of things that will come into our lives, not just in the corporate way, but also in our personal lives. I just hope that that those Terminator or Matrix movies won't really become our reality. Um, and these technologies will be a force for good.
That's actually a great answer right there. So you've been a mentor and a leader, and what advice would you give to the professionals and the soon to be people who are coming off as fresh graduates entering into the tech industry? What would you say to them to advance their careers, like you mentioned, with AI coming in and the emerging technologies coming in? What's the best advice that you can give them?
It's all the things I think I've shared, like how you can pick up skills to kind of mold yourself and develop yourself like sort of like a product. I don't want to. It feels very cold, I know, but that's like the best I can do at this time. Um, but I think beyond everything that I mentioned, you like it. Just don't be afraid to put yourself in roles, positions, projects that would help enhance you as a human being, right? That will actually bring more value to you, such that your ultimate outcome is like, how can you make yourself be in demand instead of constantly trying to convince people of your value? Does that make sense? Um, so all that will, once you have all that, then it's packaging that together. It's personal branding, it's reputation management, it's putting yourself in front of the right people, right? Doing projects and making that known to the right people, because it's eventually people who will vouch for you and will bring you into their organizations, because it just becomes like a no-brainer for them. You're going to be helping them or the organization drive their business, drive their objectives, make a positive impact, right? So if you can slowly acquire those skills and become a great USP, then that's how you really can uh, advance your career, not just in tech, right? But in all aspects of your career. At the same time, you know, even in school, or when you're volunteering for things, or you're taking up projects on the side, you're freelancing, or you're you know maybe working alongside other people, right? um, that all will actually help, right, as your first job. So you need to kind of also package all those things, right? So be a bit more strategic, I would say. It's hard when you're just starting out. I certainly didn't find this way of thinking until much later. Um, but once I found it, it became so clear how I could ladder up in my career. But like tangible advice aside, intangibly, I kind of do believe in the law of attraction. So if you actually do visualize yourself and project yourself already being that career, having that confidence, feeling it, experiencing it in your heart and your mental projections that you're already there, you'll be surprised to see that actually materialize. I've done that quite a lot. Um, and it might smell or sound a bit dubious, um, but I personally believe that there is a lot of value because it inwardly affects you in the way how you present yourself, how you talk about yourself or talk to people, and think about certain things. Because if you're there, then you kind of project, okay, these are things that you actually need in order for you to be in that position, right? So it becomes very tangible as opposed to a lofty, oh, I want that role, right? Wanting a role doesn't feel like anything. You don't feel anything. You don't make a connection to that lofty ideal. So you really need to kind of feel it, believe in it, then everything else becomes quite clear in what you need to do to achieve it.
Amazing. Uh, So next up is just I'm gonna link with something that you told earlier. Is like solve the problems and get into the real world experience. So if I just link it there, how do you encourage innovation and creativity within your teams?
When I was managing teams, uh, I would say back then I was very, very different. Um, because I haven't kind of gotten all these things in my head, right, of learning. But now that if I was to kind of look at hindsight, because hindsight is always 60/60, right? Or 20/20, sorry, 60, perfect vision, right? Essentially. Um, I would say like the number one advice is just for my teams, experiment, try and fail. And I think the failure part is more important than success. Because if you're not failing, you're not exactly learning new things. And if you succeed once at the first try, then that's the only approach that you know, right? Like it's like uh, Edison, was it like, discovering the light bulb? He didn't find one way to build a light bulb or, you harness the power of electricity. He found 99 ways in which not to do it, right? So like if you need to expose yourself to that, right? And you need to find interesting things to try. And if you fail, that's great because that's where you start to learn. And then you know in your toolbox, if a problem was to be presented to you, you know 99 ways that you shouldn't do things, right? And how those learnings becomes that three solutions that you can try, right? And it's kind of building that mindset of creativity, of finding new ways to solve a problem, is to really work that muscle, right? If you will. Because you don't fail, you don't keep trying, then there's no muscle to be built, right? So do in spite of fear and failure. Learn, pick yourself up, try something new again. There is really no secret sauce in innovation or creativity, to be honest. The more you expose yourself to these new experiences and failures, the more you can become more innovative and creative, right? So going back to my earlier point, always look for big problems to solve because these are the experiences that are better than any MBAs you can invest in my personal opinion, because you live and breathe through it, right? It rolls back to how I personally, I can't speak for everybody, but I personally feel like I've succeeded in my career. I use anecdotes and I use stories all the time. Now, if you don't have stories to tell in your arsenal and your bookshelf, then me personally, I wouldn't have anything to kind of convince people with because there's nothing to resonate with.
Definitely, definitely. So we just come into the last two questions, and if I just before we wind off, if I just ask you this, what do you see as the next big challenge and opportunity in your field?
I think I would not limit it to my field because I think the challenges and opportunities that I can think of uh, touches most industries, right? Because my field or my industry doesn't kind of work in silo. What we do impacts all industries, right? As a technology principle, and data analytics affects everybody that wants to do proper marketing and measured marketing, right? So I would say like the challenge right now for a lot of people is dealing with the pace, complexities, and change, right? Things are progressing very, very quickly, right? Um, Especially in the realm of AI. Now, the human condition unfortunately makes it hard for us to keep up with everything, right? And the hardest thing in anything is change management because people um, tend to have inertia to change simply because we've been accustomed to doing a certain way of doing things. Uh, and embracing a certain change sometimes put people's jobs at risk, right? Like let's just be quite realistic with that. So like the challenge is change management, how to take people from what they're doing today in the way they're doing things and progress them into the next wave of technological advancements, right? That can actually help improve our lives and our corporate lives, right? Alluding to what I said earlier on, if the change becomes positive, where we can spend more time on what matters, as opposed to doing the monotonous task of the day to day, that's that's where it's at, right? So I view that as also the opportunity when done well. right? But if I was to look at other opportunities, I would say in the world where there's a lot of choice, there's a lot of things that you should learn or have to learn, and so on. I would say we're going to potentially see some consolidation. It's already happening with the MarTech consolidation that's happening today. Simplification in technologies, as I mentioned, in the way of doing things, in the way we view things, and then ultimately like turning complex solutions into something more simple than what we're used to. I think that's the opportunity moving forward. Um, because if you look at what AI is meant to do, and of course there's going to be a flip side to the impacts that it can have on society and human beings. Um, the positives to that is intelligent automation, right? Or autonomous thinking. So if we can allow the new technologies to take over things, work, tasks, daily life stuff that used to take us away from life and living, I think that's a great win for humankind, right? So that's what I'm excited for. Especially now I'm a parent, I would much rather, of course, spend more time with my family than to be in front of a screen all day for 5 days a week, right? So I'm hoping this comes true, guys. Whoever's listening, please make it come true. Um, but yeah, I feel like that's probably where we're headed. I hope, and it's something to look forward to.
Amazing. So the last thing that I would just want to make sure you share your thoughts. If we just look at Asia and Sri Lanka and throughout the region, there's a lot of youth. Like I mentioned earlier, what is that final thing that you have to say in this podcast to young kids and the next generation? What do you have to say, and then we can finish it off.
I don't know whether I'm like I'm qualified to be an inspiring, person or guru or whatever you might call it. But as someone who has had to overcome quite a lot of hardships in my life, I would say view those hardships as drivers for you. Life is hard, and life will always be hard in certain ways. Don't wallow too much in it, but instead use that as a very good motivator to get to where you want to be, right? It will be very challenging, and it might take a lot of time, but if you persevere and you constantly want to evolve and change yourself into something that's better, you eventually get there, or at least 70% of the way. That's much better than who you were yesterday. Um, I would say without my hardships, I don't think I'll be here today. If I'm going to be very honest, if my life was much easier, I think I could just coast and and you know not really have that very strong desire or desperation to improve my own personal situation. So I can't say that it's anything inspiring. Everyone goes through hardships, but honestly, embrace it. Turn that into something more positive. Turn that into an energy that's actually going to help propel you into a much better person and into a much better life.
That's amazing, Kenny. Thank you so much for taking your time with your busy schedule and coming to the podcast. It's been amazing having you, and you shared a lot of insights that we have never had on the show. That's why I reached out to you way back, and hope you enjoyed Sri Lanka as well. And hope you come back again to Sri Lanka someday, and then we can have like a physical podcast when you're back here.
That sounds good. I look forward to it. I'm very thankful of my time and the opportunity of being in Sri Lanka via that summit or rather this marketing summit that we met at. I love Sri Lanka. My wife always wants to go there. She was very jealous that I was going there, and she's like, "I've always wanted to go there, but the pandemic stopped me." Um, so I made her a bit green in the eyes, but we're definitely gonna take a family trip there one day, once our kids once my kid is big enough. And definitely we'll be back, and I'll reach out. Let's do this again. Thanks for
Amazing,
having me.
amazing, Kenny. Thank you so much, Kenny.